and Dawn are still blank. Are you here, Nanette? Dawn, I guess your mics are muted.
Yeah, I'm here, yeah.
Okay, we've got your audio, and Nanette, we've got your audio, I think. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So we don't need to, and I don't know what Centre Wellington represents, but.
It should be the live stream, but that's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time from your August summer evening to attend the Heritage Centre Wellington monthly meeting. I seem to recall, I was thinking we didn't have a meeting in August last year, but I guess we did. And now I remember it. Memorable. Anyway, we'll call the meeting to order. And with the disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, are there any disclosures? If so, raise your hand, speak up. No, okay. Then can we confirm the agenda through consensus? Is that the word? Yeah. Okay, and everyone's happy with the agenda? Thank you. And approval of the minutes from July 14th. Has everybody seen the minutes? And are there any comments on those? Nancy? Unmute. Yep.
I was just wondering, at the top, it's just housekeeping, but it says that the meeting was held in council chamber. Should we be documenting somewhere that the meeting is by Zoom?
Probably. That's an interesting point. Lisa or Devlin, I'm not sure who I'm.
Either one of us can answer, but if it doesn't say that the meeting, we have to put the council chamber as the option where that's the live stream is normally hosted from, but we will definitely add that the meeting was held electronically and no persons were permitted in the council chamber if it's not there.
Okay, so that amendment will be done. Thank you. Any other comments? So by consensus, then we have approval of the minutes from July 14th. And then our action items, I see 5.1, which is the heritage permit application for 169 Victoria Crescent, Elora. And I'm wondering if you want, I can just review what we agreed to last. Does anybody need to hear what we agreed to from the minutes from last week or last meeting? If not, then the motion is in the minutes of the last meeting that we had agreed to various items, including the demolition and the rubble stone being reused, and the balance of the heritage permit regarding the new construction of the accessory building be deferred until the next meeting. So pending, I guess, our discussions and approval with Bill Wyminga and the site visit also, which happened. Okay, so at this point, I think there was some last minute documentation that was sent out also, some pictures of the proposed options for the dwelling. So is there anything, Bill, then that you would perhaps start us off with, anything you need to add or you want to talk, bring to our attention?
Hi, Phil. No, not really. It's still slight changes are still coming, but more or less that's the look.
Okay. Is there anyone else here who's connected with you, Bill? Like, is there?
No.
No? Okay. So you're the only delegate, you're a delegation of one.
Yeah.
Are there any questions then for Bill, or we can start off the discussion on this, on where we're at with this process then?
Can I interject here, Phil?
Sure, absolutely.
Just before you begin the discussion, I just wanted to add that I circulated the 2 plans that were submitted just before the meeting by Bill. So hopefully everybody got those. Just a point of clarification that the garage door is slightly different on each of the 2 renderings. So they were 2 options. And I think what Bill was trying to show was that in the second one that I sent forward, it had no second story windows at the sides above the garage. So I think he said that's what his preference was, is to not have the second story windows. And just a point of clarification is that the garage door is shown in the first rendering was shown as rounded on the top, and in the second rendering was shown as gabled. And so I think Bill said that the gabled was an error. It's actually going to be a rounded door at the top. So I just wanted to clarify that before you begin the discussion.
Okay. And I guess I'd have one question for you then, is based on the motion that that we passed at the last meeting, is another motion then required for us today?
Yes, so at the last meeting, as you said, it was the committee had approved or is recommending approval of the demolition of the shed with the reuse of the stone as much as possible. And then part two that you're deciding today would be the permit for the construction of the new garage with an accessory apartment above. And as discussed previously, and just again for the committee's reference, is that this does need to go through a minor variance process for a slight increase in height as well. That process will follow this one, but the heritage process needs to be confirmed first to ensure that the committee is okay with the direction that this is taking before we take it to the committee of adjustment for any kind of a variance. So my only comment is that if the committee does approve as per the latest plans received, and you'll have to determine, Bill, which option, if you're going with the second story windows or without, because it does have to be fairly detailed in terms of the final drawings and plans that we're confirming. But we also would just need to, I think, put in a small little caveat saying that if the height is slightly reduced, then it doesn't need to come back to this committee. Just to reduce any kind of, further obligation for the owner to come back for,
Okay.
yeah, if the committee of adjustment, for example, doesn't approve the increase in height, and then Bill, like just something like that, that might trigger another review because it's not exactly identical to the plans that were submitted. So you could do plus or minus, something that the committee is comfortable with. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, great. I think that's important to know. So any questions on the process about what we are just about to discuss here? Go ahead, Erin.
I don't have questions on the process, just more
Okay.
questions on the design. So if there's
Sure. Why don't you start? If there are no questions on process, because I just want to make sure everybody's up on the same page about what we're discussing, which would basically be the design that's been put forward, and then if we're happy with that design, then we will be passing a motion to that effect. So go ahead. I think we'll just hear from everybody, and if you don't want to, you have nothing to add, that's fine. But go ahead, Erin. You can start off with your questions and or your comments.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the previous drawing. I guess it was more of a line drawing, a CAD drawing that was submitted for a July meeting. And I just wanted to confirm a few things in terms of, so the overall dimensions, are they the same as the previous submission? Because in the previous submission, we had the plans and the interiors just kind of, and that was all dimensioned out. I was just curious, kind of based on the rendering and drawings, if any of the sort of overall dimensions have changed, because, and maybe it's the fact that I think the proportions of the window and the garage have changed a little bit. So maybe that's why it looks, I don't know, maybe a bit different than the previous submission.
Hi, Erin. The size has changed a little bit. We had the garage at 18 feet, which I started measuring other garages, and that seems to be really, really tight. So I moved it to, everything else is the same. It's just the width of the garage. I widened to 24 feet, but I think I'm going to drop it back to 22 feet. By the end of the week, I should have final drawings. It's just taking, there's a lot of back and forth, but it's not going fast enough. But I have another meeting on Thursday, and I should have the final drawings then. So it should go, it'll go a little smaller, but not much.
Okay.
Okay. Was that your question? You're happy for now then, Erin?
Yeah, I think so. I think because that's stretched out, and it looks like, and it might be, I might not be looking at the correct drawing from July, but I think the garage door in the July drawing maybe was drawn a little bit low, because it looks like it's almost the same height as the just regular doors. Yeah, just the
My
proportions
plan is
of
to
the
make
whole
the
facade have changed a bit.
My plan is to make the garage door as high as possible to mimic like a coach house look.
Right.
So the door is probably going to be like 9.5 feet tall at the highest part of the arch,
Okay.
just to have a nice arch. Most people have most people have more of an arch. I'm looking for a round. So just to
Okay.
show that it looks old, or it pretends to look old.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Okay, thanks. I'm just having a little problem with my agenda flipping in and out here, but that's okay. I can deal with that. Thank you, Erin. Anyone else have any questions or comments then for Bill?
Only an aesthetic question. Is
Go ahead.
it a single door or is it a double door that you're going to be using for the garage?
Hi, Nicole. It's a single door,
Oh.
one big single door, 60 feet wide. I think it'll look better. I thought about it a lot to have two doors, but I think it looks nice with one single door.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nico. Anyone else? Questions for Bill? Are we commenting then on whether we prefer the windows on the second story or the no window?
The windows I don't know why they're there. The windows shouldn't be there.
Okay.
They don't look right. I want them gone. I want
Right.
it simple, plain on the front. My plan is to make the window and the door taller to hide some of the brick on the main floor, but lose the windows on the second floor.
Okay,
Can I ask a question about that, Bill, just to clarify? It's only the windows on the front of the second story that you're
Yes,
removing,
that's right.
not on the other elevations?
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
thanks.
okay. So then your proposed drawing would be the 3D rendering would be the version without the windows, which I agree actually does look
Yes.
a lot better. Looks. If there are no other questions for Bill, then we're entertaining a motion to approve the heritage permit for the construction of this dwelling, and a garage, I should call it. That's not a dwelling, I guess. And what would the specific wording of that be then? Do we have a,
You've got it pretty much bang on there, Phil.
okay. So would someone make that motion? Go ahead.
You talked about it's not a house, it's a garage. Does it fit all of the specifications of a garage, or does it fit all of the specifications of a house? Just so that I'm really clear.
It's a good question. Bill?
I think, did you want me to answer that just from the planning and variance perspective?
Yes.
When we look at this, it has to be, in terms of a garage, it has to meet the accessory building regulations. So the coverage that's allotted to a garage in the urban center, especially within the heritage area overlay, which this property is 30% total lot coverage. So that's the footprint of all buildings cannot be over 30% lot coverage. And then in addition, the garage itself cannot be more than 10% lot coverage. So it's quite a bit under that. I think, Bill, when we looked at the previous drawings, it was under
Yes.
8% or 5%, I can't recall, but it didn't go over. So it meets the subordinate definition in terms of it's lower in height than the main building. We looked at that from a heritage perspective as well. And then from a planning perspective, it's lower in height. The overall height can be 4.6 meters. Bill will be asking for a variance for that to be, I think, just taller than 5.5 meters. But that's also, so the committee is aware, going to be our new regulation going forward anyway for accessory buildings. We're moving from 4.6 overall height to 5.5 because our discussions with the building department staff have concluded that we're supposed to be encouraging these in terms of accessory units for infill, particularly over garages, as in the coach house type of environment and look. So we need a minimum, there has to be a minimum height, and what we found works well is about 5.5 meters. So Bill's proposal will be just over that, I think. But I know that he's trying to reduce the overall height as well as much as he can. So anyway, again, that's part of the future minor variance application. But in terms of the garage itself, it may appear to be larger than a traditional garage because it has an accessory unit above, but these are also encouraged, and it's not going over on any of the other zoning regulations other than the one about height that he will be asking for and the committee of adjustment will be deciding on. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think then the motion that we're going to entertain would be to approve the heritage permit application for 169 Victoria Crescent.
Can I make, sorry, Phil, can I just,
Go ahead.
one
You
minor,
can make the motion.
one minor alteration to that the committee recommends approval because you're not actually
Yeah.
approving it, it's council approving. So
Yeah,
just to
right.
clarify that
Yeah.
wording.
Motion to recommend approval of the heritage permit application for 169 Victoria Crescent. Is there any need to add anything to that, referring back, or we've already got the motion from last month, which deals with the commemorative strategy and the rubble stone and so on. So that those two motions are in effect linked together then?
It would just be in accordance with the most recent approved plans, which would be dated today's date.
Okay, so pending application in accordance with,
So Phil, you might just want to have that the Heritage Centre Wellington recommend to council issuance of a heritage permit for 169 Victoria Crescent, Elora, to rebuild a detached garage in accordance with the drawings, and we'll get the date off the drawings.
perfect. So that's the motion. Do we have someone to, yes, Don, go ahead. You're bringing the motion, seconding.
I can.
Seconded. Nancy, thank you. Okay, and any discussion on the motion then? Okay, all in favor?
Just the word rebuild. Is that confusing? That's
Why
an
not?
motion.
Uh,
Are you rebuilding, or are you building new, demolishing and building new?
That's a good point.
We can change it to construct a detached garage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nico. Any other discussion? Okay, so all in favor of the motion? Okay, any opposed? Okay, that motion's carried. Thank you very much, Bill, for being in attendance. And we, I guess, Yeah, will there be some follow-up that we will hear back from you on any, I guess if you need to make any changes, that would come back to us. Yeah, Okay.
I'll send you the final drawings, but it's not going to change too much.
okay. Well, thanks
All right.
very much, Bill,
Thanks
and
very
good,
much.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you.
good luck. Folks, my agenda is kind of moving in and out here, but I see we're having that completed item 5.1. We're now at 5.2, which is a heritage permit application, addition of fireplace and chimney, Henderson Street, 37 Henderson Street in Elora. And I believe there is some attached photos, some attached plans, and is it, Colin, are you here to speak to that? Just
Colin,
unmute.
you'll just have to unmute your mic.
Yes, I am, and
Okay.
I'm the owner.
And you're the owner. Is there anyone else? I see, I think it's Mark Agnew, right? Hi,
That's
Mark.
correct.
Okay, so we got a few comments back from you via Marianne today, and at the suggestion of Jean, that those comments be requested prior to the meeting. And did everyone get a chance to look at the email that went out earlier today, I think it was, with a description of the brickwork and so on and the work that was to be done? If not, it's in your email or I can read it for you. Okay, Mariana, did you have anything you wanted to bring to our attention before we start the discussion?
Thanks, Phil. No, I think we discussed this at length a few months ago when Colin brought the application or the discussion forward anyway to see what the committee's thoughts were before making a formal application. So essentially, I know that the hydro, the meter and that will be moved over. There was some question about that. So that will be moved over to the right if you're actually looking at where the proposed chimney will be. There was a question just about what's going to be used, what type of brick. So Mark has specified that it will be very similar to the brick that is currently there on the dwelling. In terms of size, shape, porosity, color, it'll be very similar. So it will be quite compatible and blend in. Maybe Mark can speak to, I know there were some questions about the mortar that will be used to make sure it's compatible, that it's not too different from what's currently there. And I don't know if the current mortar right now is limestone or not, but maybe if Mark can speak to that, because I think that was an outstanding question. And then I know there were some questions just about the cut through the roof, how that will be handled with the waterproofing, the flashing and that. Now I know that, I think Colin, you had mentioned that you had undergone reconstruction of the eaves and soffits, and that was aluminum, and then I think you said that you had redone all of that.
Yeah.
And then there was also the question about the creosote, and Mark had explained that there shouldn't be any impact in that respect either. So those were the main issues, and I think one of the significant ones that the committee was concerned about was the joints in terms of how where the new brick is going to be butting up against the existing, how that the joints will be treated. And again, if you could speak maybe, Mark, to some of the mortar that would be used and the compatibility between the two.
I'll start off with the mortar. That sort of period dating back to when those houses were built, the mortar was a very different formula than what's being used today. And that formula is actually what they call a 116. So it is actually 1 part Portland, 1 part lime, and 6 parts sand. And that is actually a very accurate formula for the mortar that was used exactly for the time period that this house was built, spanning from about 100 years back to about 80 years back. And then from that point forward, things changed a little bit as the density of the brick changed. The idea being that the mortar has to be a little bit softer than the brick. This is the principle of all masonry units, so that the mortar joints crack and not the bricks. And so the mortar is actually the exact same formula. And when it dries and cures, and it will take a little while, like once I've put the mortar on, within about a year and a half to 2 years, that mortar will be exactly the same in terms of coloration and makeup as the original. And so if that speaks enough to you about the mortar matching, then the brick itself is actually, there's some people, the bricks are actually being sent from the Netherlands, where they actually make this brick that matches exactly the old style, which is called an Ontario size brick, and the Ontario formula. They have the same porosity, the same size, the same density. They're kind of spongy. So they are going to expand and contract at the exact same rate as the original brick. And so as everything is tied into the original wall, nothing is going to conflict to create any damage there, because they all have the exact same formulation. So all of the materials that I propose to use have the exact same formula as was used when this house was built. And the color, in terms of coloration, because I know that there was some discussion about new things and how they match into old, and not wanting to be exact, but in this case, perhaps maybe we do want it to look as close as possible. That being said, it's not available to me the more orange range of color that Colin has on his house. So this chimney will be unique in such a way that it will be all of the red, the more red color that's present in the original thing, because nobody is making, or it's available for the orangey color. So this just simply means that it will be, it will match in almost every way, except that it won't have quite the color range. But in terms of having all the properties that match as closely as possible to the original, that will be present.
Thank you, Mark. That's
You're welcome.
quite a detailed explanation there. Thank you for that. Lots of information. Any questions directly for Mark then? Jean.
You caught me unawares. I wasn't near the mute button. Thank you, Mark. That looks like a kind of neat drum set you've got behind you.
Yes, it is.
So thank you for that explanation. That was very good. The 116 Portland lime and sand. Is that white Portland cement or gray?
It's going to be white in this case. The gray is a little bit too dark for my liking. Now there is a certain, like when I first built it, it's going to look a lot lighter at first, but as time progresses and the mortar that I'm putting in new begins to have the same environmental impact as the old stuff. I mean, we're talking about brand new materials versus 100-year-old materials. They're going to match perfectly.
Yeah, thank you. No, white is what I was thinking of. Sort of in the research that I did, it said it should be
absolutely.
white.
Yes.
When you talk about the density porosity, have you measured, how did you measure the density of the old brick versus the new brick?
Well, this simply breaks down for me as experience that I've been using these bricks for 20 years. And I know that they cut the same, they feel the same, they absorb water the same, they look the same. And so I have to draw a conclusion that they are very much the same.
Thank you. It was the water issue that I was getting to. So you've measured because the hard bricks will shed the water, the soft bricks will then absorb the
yeah, it's
water.
funny because the new bricks being so much harder being made of clay, more so than what the older ones are made of, they actually last a lot longer. The older bricks, for example, because any house I encounter that's they absorb a lot of water.
Yeah.
The old ones, but they also allow it to escape. They're very porous and they breathe. And they last a lot longer for that reason, whereas the newer clay bricks, after 20 years, they get water and they explode.
Yeah.
So I think it's far superior, but these are the bricks that somebody's very clever to make for us. And they are exactly a match to what we want.
That's great, great. Thank you very much. It sort of answered my questions.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Mark. Any other questions then for, go ahead. Sorry, Nico, go ahead.
There's a color variation within the brick on the current home. In terms of the
Yes.
brick that you're using, are you anticipating that you'll get the same kind of color variation, similar color variation as it ages? Is the current darker brick as opposed to the orangey kind of brick, is that just determined by age, or is it inherent in the actual brick?
It's inherent in the actual brick. The actual color of the brick is not going to change that much because it's all the way through the brick. So even with weather variance and sun, they're going to stay the same. So what I'm going to do is actually buy two variations of this brick. I have a dark one and I have a slightly lighter one. But as I had mentioned before, what is not being made and what I cannot get is the orangey colors. So this chimney will be built with a 50-50 blend of two different kinds of brick that are same manufacturer, same density, same everything. But one's going to be a little lighter, one's going to be a little darker, and that's the best match that is possible.
Thank you.
Can I add something there, Phil?
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I think when we talk about heritage and alterations to designated properties, and Mark mentioned this a little bit. So obviously we want to have compatibility, and the previous way of thinking was that you wanted it to match exactly and try to source the same bricks. But now we also want the building to be legible. So the newer principles are about compatibility, but also legibility, so that we know upon close inspection that someone can read the building and say, oh, okay, this chimney was actually, although it looks from a distance like it might have always been there or should have been there, upon close inspection, you want to know, be able to see that, yes, this was a later addition. This chimney was, put in much later. So I think actually what Mark has described would probably work to our benefit in terms of that approach, because although, again, from a distance, it will look compatible. It will be very similar. Upon close inspection, you'll probably be able to notice that this brick is slightly different, doesn't have the variation that the original house has. So it actually works well in terms of, I think, meeting the heritage principles, but the rest of the committee can comment as well.
For recording purposes, will there be pictures of what it looks like currently as opposed to what it will look like afterward? Just for recording the history of the home?
That's a good question for Colin.
Yes, certainly.
Colin
I'll be very happy to do a work in progress number of photos, followed by the final photo, which would be showing the original wall and then showing the chimney on that wall as it goes and then as it's completed. Sure.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is that good, Nico?
Absolutely. That's perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then that brings us to basically, at this point, we are then, again, a question of process. Mariana, we're going to then approve the permit for this.
Yes, so you'd be recommending approval
Yes.
of the permit as per the drawing submitted.
And I'm wondering, Lisa, could you do a motion for us then to recommend?
Yep, that Heritage Centre Wellington recommend the issuance of a heritage permit for the addition of a fireplace and chimney at 37 Henderson Street, Elora, in accordance with the drawings. And again, I don't have the date, but I will add that.
Okay. I guess what I need first is someone to move that motion. Erin? Okay, and then Sherry, you can be the seconder. Thank you. Any discussion then on the motion? Everyone's happy with what we're doing? Okay, thank you. And then if there's no additional discussion, all in favor?
Sorry, Phil, just before you do the vote, did the committee wish to do what Nico suggested and ask for pictures to be submitted, or are as part of the motion?
I think it would be, for archival purposes, I think it would be a good idea.
Okay, so that,
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, sure.
all right.
So we can add to the motion and that commemorative photos be added. Mariana, would that be the correct wording? Or be submitted to the township?
Yes. You could say photo documentation for archival purposes.
Okay, thank you.
I will also be documenting the process as I go, as it's a fairly unique project, and so there will be plenty of that from me as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Sounds like we may have someone to be at one of our open houses.
Indeed.
Okay, Lisa, when you got it, you can just reread it for us, please.
Sure. That Heritage Centre Wellington recommend the issuance of heritage permit HP 2020-003 for the addition of a fireplace and chimney at 37 Henderson Street, Elora, and that photo documentation be submitted to the township for archival purposes.
And everybody happy with that? Any questions or comments? Okay, so all in favor? Just raise your hand, or anyone opposed? And that motion's carried. Thanks very much. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mark, for being here. We really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
your input and your detailed descriptions for us. That really helps the process.
You're very welcome.
Can I add, please, to Colin and Mark, that the heritage permit will, I will have to write a staff report just recommending approval of the permit. And that will go to council on August, is it the 25th, Lisa? Or the 31st?
I believe it's the 24th, but
24th, the Monday.
Yeah.
So, and I will let you know, you don't need to attend that meeting, and I will let you know the outcome of the decision there.
Well,
And then
thank
you can
very-
apply for your building permit if one is necessary. I imagine one is necessary for that.
Yes, yes, we
I
will.
would think so. Yes.
Yes. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that completes everything under section 5. So information items, we have a number of things to go through. 6.1, update of heritage processes, delegation of authority for heritage permits. Mariana, is that something you're going to discuss?
Yes, thank you, Phil. I attached, I will definitely attach the bylaw to the agenda there. So I actually just wanted to bring this to the committee, these two items to the committee's attention regarding our processes and trying to streamline them a little bit, make it a little bit easier for the public and council. So I wanted to have the discussion about how the committee feels about moving forward the processes to issue heritage permits under delegated authority for matters where the committee agrees and the owner agrees, and there's no, there are no contentious issues, there's no opposition. We could recommend that staff on the recommendation of the Heritage Committee can issue those permits rather than having to write a report to council every time and having council have the final approval. So that is allowed under the Heritage Act. Right now under the Heritage Act for designated properties, basically there's a process that requires the owner to notify council of the proposed alterations, and then council can make a decision with conditions or can refuse. And so what the discussion has been is to try to, again, to streamline the process. So what we would we could have a discussion about is that whether the committee is comfortable with doing that and then taking that to council to alter the delegation of authority bylaw for the committee to be able to approve heritage permits rather than just recommend approval to council. And just so you know as well, if you look through that bylaw, we had a little bit of discussion about this with Jean and I mentioned a few times something that's visible from the street and how it needed council approval because it's visible from the street. That is not in the Heritage Act. That was something that is in our delegation of authority bylaw where if, and I can't remember, I don't have it right in front of me, but the way it's written is I think if there is an alteration that is visible from the street, then it requires council approval. So that would be like any type of major addition, a major alteration. You know, it has to go to council. So I'd like to know the committee's thoughts on that. I wanted to bring that to the committee to see if there's a way we can try to streamline these processes. And then we would have to obviously take that to council and get council to approve that. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Just before, I have one question, just for my own clarification, Mariana. Could you give us an example of what you're talking about, like perhaps even what we did tonight?
Yeah.
Versus something that's non-contentious,
Right.
perhaps we would have approved.
Okay.
Versus something that would have required that we couldn't have done.
Right. So it's a bit of a gray area in the Heritage Act because the way it's written is not just that any alterations to a designated property need council approval. I believe it says anything that's likely to impact the heritage attributes, I believe. So that's a little bit, again, of a gray area, but so if somebody's doing routine maintenance, for example, replacing a roof or painting, something that's not actually mentioned, let's say, in the heritage attributes. So let's say the heritage attributes are just for the front facade. And it just says that the brickwork or the stonework is important and the front windows. Then if somebody is proposing an alteration such as replacement of shingles on a roof or painting, they technically wouldn't be required to go through a heritage permit. Some municipalities require them to go through one in any case, just so they can review it. And I typically tell people to submit an application regardless of what they're doing, just submit an application so we can review it. So when it's relatively minor, or where, let's say they're doing something at the back that you cannot see, that nobody can see from the road, and that is not likely to impact anything mentioned in the bylaw, then we can issue that under delegated authority, just staff would issue it. In any of the cases that we've seen where they've been on the agenda, those would have required council approval, generally speaking. So anything to do with an addition that's visible from the road, like the one, I don't know if it was an addition, but for example, what Bill is doing. So anything to do with demolition, like the one on 169 Victoria that we just dealt with, the chimney that we just dealt with, 37 Henderson, because that is visible from the street and is being added to the wall, and the brick, you know, the schoolhouse, former schoolhouse walls are mentioned as heritage attributes. So anything like that would require a heritage permit application and council approval under our current system. So that's sort of the difference between the two types of applications or work, where one would require council approval and the other wouldn't.
Okay, thank you. Open it up for discussion then?
Mariana, so what you're proposing is the change would be if there was no contentious issues, for example, the chimney that we were just looking at, and everything came back, you know, the way that we wanted, the brick is right, the mortar's right. So that wouldn't have to go to council if everyone agreed and we were satisfied with what they were doing. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
It's a way to try to reduce the amount of, let's say, administrative matters that are going to council that we probably don't need council input on. They're relatively minor. I would still suggest that when there's anything to do with demolition, such as the one at 169 Victoria, they always go to council. If they're mentioned in the bylaw, for example, I would suggest anything to do with demolition should go to council so that it's just in a public process. And the public has an opportunity to go to council and, you know, object, I guess, or have council provide some more information to council. But anything that's more sort of a routine nature and has gone through a process where we've reviewed it all against heritage principles, we've had the opportunity to ask questions, we have proper plans, and we're generally okay with the decision, then I think there's some opportunity just to make things go a little smoother. The other, like the background to all this as well, just so you're aware, is this bylaw was created before there was any heritage planning staff. The township, the Heritage Committee was administered through the building department and the chief building official, basically. So there was no heritage planner. The planning department wasn't involved in the applications at the time. So it was a way to, it just required all applications basically to go to council. So that's kind of the history behind it as well.
Okay. Just if you've got questions, just jump in and go ahead, Erin.
I guess I just have a question over the process. And so this change would be written into the bylaw? Okay. And then, so if as a committee we didn't agree on something that was maybe considered to be standard, or that wouldn't be listed as something that needed council approval, how does that work? We can still kind of bump it up to council, or would the owner disagree with whatever our final recommend? Like, how does that work if there's sort of a dispute within?
Yeah, if there's any dispute, if the owner doesn't agree to some conditions, let's say that the committee recommends imposing, if the committee doesn't agree, or if staff doesn't agree with the committee's recommendation, so that would go to council. So it would be sort of, council would be the decision-making body on anything where there's not agreement.
And that would be in writing then?
Yes, that would be, so we would be taking this bylaw and basically amending it. So what I can do is, again, further discussion is required or warranted, but what I'm suggesting is that based on whatever feedback I received today, if the committee is agreeable as well, what I can do is start to draft some changes to this bylaw and then bring it back before the committee. And we can rework it, you know, make additional amendments just so that everybody's comfortable, the committee's comfortable before it proceeds to council.
Great.
Yeah, okay. So the document that you, there's a couple documents, I guess, are the existing documentation that you're talking about.
The existing one is the Delegation of Authority bylaw, and I can pull it up here.
That's what's on the agenda.
Yes, Heritage Permit Delegation. So bylaw 2008-083. Some of it could be a little bit outdated. This was written obviously in 2008, so it's quite some time ago. Probably could use some updating anyway for some of the language. We don't have right now heritage. We have one heritage district, so that's, you know, we can look at that section in much more detail as well. But it also sets out what we can ask for in terms of any type of heritage permit, like an alteration to a designated property, what we can ask for. It sort of sets all of that out. So I'm just putting this on the agenda to begin the discussions. If the committee can take some more time, obviously, and you know, review this bylaw in much more detail, having like understanding now what the aim is or the goal, and see where you're comfortable sort of making alterations and thinking that we could make things a little bit easier in some respects, or not take everything to council, to try to again reduce the timelines and reduce the amount of staff time needed to process some of these, just to make things a little more efficient.
Yeah, Don?
So are we talking just about section 17, or is it other components in there?
Let me just look at it quickly here.
17 is the one where it's visible from the road, as you were talking about.
No, we're talking about looking at the entire bylaw. Like,
Okay.
What I can do is, if the committee is comfortable, I can take a shot at revising it, updating it, where I feel there's some need and some ability to make things a little bit more efficient, and can bring it back as I can take an edited copy so you could see all the changes, the before and after. I can do it that way through track changes, so that would help you understand, and I'll explain every section of any proposed updates.
Yeah, and I think section 17, certainly you can see where it says council, and you're suggesting like that would be one edit, to say that would be our committee and staff. Yeah, I can see how that would fit. Yeah.
What we have to do through these bylaws, because the Heritage Act has specific wording about when council approval is required, what we would do is start with the Heritage Act, go through all of that wording, go through the wording here in the Delegation of Authority bylaw, and see where there's opportunity for efficiency, where we can delegate some of that to staff to issue through consultation with the Heritage Committee. And then, so it will clearly have to set out when something has to go to council and when something doesn't have to go to council.
I had a second question though too, if I may. So is this coming from provincial legislation that's saying we speed up the process, or is this coming from council, or is this staff itself?
No, it's staff. It's just,
of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's just, like I said before, so this was written in 2008. Now that we have heritage planning staff, and I'll go through the next bylaw as well, that or the next section is kind of a similar thing. These things were in place quite some time ago, before we really had these processes in place. Okay. So it's just a way to make things more efficient from a staff perspective, trying to save time and money.
Yeah, I think it gives our council a little bit more say in that way, not always letting, well, no, I won't put it that way, not always going to council to decide. Our committee can make some decisions. So I think that's a pretty strong voice that might come out of that too.
Yeah, I think that was a point that I was going to make too, is that it might, it gives the committee a little bit more, and I couldn't think of the word, but just a little bit more standing or influence. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, Mariana, that you work on a draft amended bylaw then, and if you can do it in a format that shows the changes, that would be very helpful. I know for me, I like being able to see what's actually changed. Makes it easier to follow along, I think.
Do we need to do a motion for it then, or
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think I can just start working on it. But what I would ask is that if you could take some time over the next few weeks or month, like there's no real rush for this, but I just wanted to put it out there now. And if you can take some time to look at the bylaw where you see that there might be some opportunity where the committee could, provide some more input and decision-making ability, then let me know. Send me an email, send the group an email, and I'll try to incorporate some of that into the draft bylaw.
So presumably, once the bylaw was completed, or the draft bylaw, that would be something that council would have to approve.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering if Steve, if you would comment on that, on your, how you would perceive this, and if that's something you would be in support of as well.
Yeah, Phil, I think it's a good idea. I think setting out the guidelines and the policy is the key to it, so that there's clear, I think there's clear direction as to what you're going to approve and what you're not going to approve. I think the difficulty is you never want to put the committee in a controversial position, that it always falls back on the council. But otherwise, I would say that for sure, if there's items where a lot of times in the heritage permit, the property's listed because the house has attributes, but the listing goes on the property. But if there's like a shed has nothing to do with it, then you say, well, why is it even coming, right, before council? So setting it out, setting the parameters will be the key to it, and I think that it would flow well.
Okay. Nancy? Thank you, Steve.
I was just going to add, in the changes that you're proposing, you said there had to be a consensus amongst the committee. Does that mean unanimous, or, you know, and to Steve's point too, if there's something that seems to be that, would it be go to council, and if that it's approved for information, and then, but if there was any concerns that unbeknownst to the committee that council might have, is there some kind of parameters in there that would help, to Steve's point, give a bit of protection to the committee, but also, you know, balancing authority versus accountability, right?
I think we can talk about how we would bring these forward in terms of consensus versus vote. But I think that just falls to the current practices of the committee that are in the terms of reference in terms of how the committee votes. So like a permit would come to the committee would vote, and whether you do that by consensus or by, you know, that's up to you. But we could build that in. But again, the idea is not to take, it's only for the routine items where everybody is agreeing and it's relatively minor. So it's not anything, it's not to take, you know, council's ability away necessarily either. It's really just to try to reduce the number of these that are quite minor and quite routine from going to council with each one, and trying to just make it a little bit quicker for the applicants too, where they don't have to wait. Sometimes I can't get the reports done the same month, then they have to wait another month before they can go to council, right? So it just adds a lot of time to the process. And all I'm really saying is to council is the committee's recommending approval of this. I don't think I've had one go to council where council has questioned necessarily or disagreed with the committee's recommendation when it's a heritage permit matter. Other than very low.
Yeah.
What's that?
Nancy, as a follow-up, and then Jean.
Yeah, I just noticed that the reason I put it out there is that tonight there wasn't unanimous on the one vote that we had. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, we're clear that if there is some kind of, whether it's unanimous or not, was just my question.
Just on that point, I wasn't sure when you said it wasn't unanimous, there was no, I didn't see anyone I perhaps should have asked for abstentions, I guess.
On the one vote you did ask, was anybody against? And I did see a hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Okay. Yeah, that's part of the problem with this this process, the Zoom process. So, Nico, go ahead.
Just a vague procedural question. The issue of visibility from the street. So that's contained in the delegation of authority, but where the Heritage Act is silent on that, does one supersede the other, or do these work in tandem with one another? Can you explain that to me, how this process works?
The Heritage Act is the law that says that council must approve these alterations. So it also provides the ability for council to delegate this to staff. So certain things in the Heritage Act, council can delegate, other things they can't or are silent. So in this case, for heritage permits, for alterations to designated properties or anything to do with demolition on a designated property, council has to make the decision or can delegate it to staff. So really, they do work in tandem. We can't say anything that contravenes the Heritage Act in a bylaw. Like, we can't do anything procedurally that would contravene it, but we can add processes that make things more efficient that are not contravening the Heritage Act. So where the Heritage Act allows council to delegate, if council chooses to delegate their power, then they can do so by a bylaw, and that's what this is.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I think then that's something we could review, the existing documentation, and then you'll go ahead and start the revision process, Mariana? Yep.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, actually, for bringing that forward. Okay. Cultural Heritage Landscape Study Update 6.2. I think is that back to you then, Mariana? Did you want to?
Sorry, was there another item for the demolition control bylaw? Or?
Yeah, sorry. Was that not what we were talking about?
I'm just trying to find the agenda here.
Yeah, there is. Is that?
Yeah,
okay,
that's right after. Sorry, that was also for 6.1.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just, I knew there were the two together, sort of.
Okay,
so,
I thought we were sort of talking about them both, so my mistake.
No, I just wanted to explain this one a little further. Actually, it's slightly different. So under the Planning Act, so this actually started with the Planning Act. So the Planning Act allows council to declare an area or designate an area for demolition control with respect to residential buildings. So really what that is for, the intended use under the Planning Act, is so that residences are not demolished without council approval. So you're trying to retain existing residential stock, residential housing. And the only demolition that's permitted is when council approves demolition. So I can tell you that the history of this bylaw is, again, before we had a municipal register that included non-designated properties. So the changes to the Heritage Act in 2006, I think, allowed non-designated properties to be added to a municipal register. So designated properties were always included on a register. They were the protected ones with a bylaw. And then the changes to the Heritage Act allowed listing. So that's what we call non-designated properties to be listed. And what that did is it gave additional protection for listed properties from demolition. So prior to this, if somebody applied for a demolition permit, the chief building official was obligated to issue it. They were obligated to issue it. They couldn't stop it unless they had this listing authority. So we started adding properties of interest that were on our heritage inventory at the time. We added those to the municipal register as non-designated properties. So right now we have approximately about 110 to 120 designated properties on our municipal register with bylaws. Such as the two today that came for heritage permits. So again, those alterations require council approval. There's also listed properties. So the listed properties, we have approximately, I would say 900 or so. I'm not sure of the exact numbers. So what that listing, and when we added our inventory to our municipal register in approximately 2012, I believe it was, when we did that, and then we added about 400 a couple of years ago through our committee. So what that listing does is it protects properties in the short term from demolition, and that gives us the opportunity 60 days. So the Heritage Act, when you list a property, allows you 60 days to review it before it sort of stalls that process. So council can we can do the research, and council can make a decision as to, we can go forward with a recommendation to council to say, we believe this shouldn't be demolished, it should be designated. So the only way to stop a property from being demolished is to designate it once a demolition request has been made. So the listing effectively protects a property in the short term. The reason this bylaw was put forward, one of the main reasons back in, when was it done? The bylaw number 2007. Again, the chief building official was dealing with heritage. The building department was dealing with heritage. And what they did is, this was their ability to stop demolitions in the short term and to require them to go to council. It's a 30-day restriction. Okay, so a demolition control bylaw under the Planning Act provided the 30-day restriction on demolition, required a process to go to council. Otherwise, if there was no demolition control bylaw, a chief building official can issue a demolition permit in 10 days. That's required under the Building Code Act. They need to issue a permit within 10 days. So the demolition control bylaw sort of stalled that process for 30 days. It gave the Heritage Committee the ability to review any property. So if it was, let's say, on an inventory in the past, there was just the inventory. If there was a property on the inventory, then the Heritage Committee had 30 days now to review it. And the chief building official would send it out to the Heritage Committee to say, I received a demolition request. We have 30 days. And then the chief building official took the report to council and looked at the Heritage Committee's recommendation. The Municipal Register has now provided a 60-day window. So after all of that, to make a long story short, the demolition control bylaw really is unnecessary, I would argue. It adds a level of process to properties that are actually not on the municipal register, that may have been damaged, that need to come down. It requires the chief building official to write reports to council for demolition of buildings that otherwise really there should be no opposition to. The Municipal Register has now provided that extra protection, and actually is better because it provides 60 days. And so what we're suggesting again is that in order to make things more efficient, and the caveat here is that we have to be completely comfortable that all of our significant properties are now listed. So what we're suggesting is for the urban area only within our urban centers, we have gone through systematically the properties that were listed in the past and the properties, the additional 400 that we listed a couple of years ago. If we are, the intention has been that once the municipal register is satisfactory and we are, just confident in it and satisfied that it captures any properties we would want to halt demolition on to study for 60 days, once they're on there, then we can basically remove the demolition control bylaw, because as staff and as for council, there really is no other purpose to it. The municipal register has replaced that ability to stall properties from demolition. So for anything with a heritage interest. For the rural properties, I would suggest that's not the case yet, because we are still working on adding those properties to the register. So we're obviously not confident that everything that we think should be captured has been captured in the rural area. So I'm not suggesting that that happened for the rural area, only for the urban centers, to remove the demolition control bylaw, because again, a property of interest is already captured under the municipal register and has its own process. So I hope that explains sort of the history behind why that bylaw came into play, and that it's really, we feel it's just like, again, another level of red tape that's not really needed at this point in time when we're confident in our register.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. I think just open to questions then for Mariana on this. Go ahead, Erin.
I have a question. I guess in terms of the registry, so through that process, were owners able to defer being on the registry list? Like, I have confidence in the registry, and you guys were super thorough in going through not only like a physical inventory, but also looking at like dates of construction and things like that. Like, it was a level approach to how that was put together. But and I understand like that's the existing bylaw is probably pretty onerous for people that this doesn't apply to and for the town. But I'm just wondering if there's going to be those little pockets or like the odd property that it will.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. I think, and I can go back because I've actually documented them. When we were trying to add the properties to the register a few years back when we did that, there was, I would say, a handful, probably less than a dozen, probably about 10 to 12 properties that were adamant that they not be added to the register. They didn't want, you know, for whatever reason. And we, in order to move the register forward without sort of obstacles or objections, we told them that they wouldn't be added this time and we would put their names on hold. So that is a good point. What I think has to, if we decide to go this route and remove the demolition control bylaw, that again, I said is issued under the Planning Act, we'd have to be confident in our register. So what we could do is those properties, for example, that were removed or that were on hold, we could just add them and basically explain to council that we're adding these properties because they were not added last time. And you might have people coming to object. So it should go hand in hand with, again, sort of a finalized register that we're confident in. We could also say we could wait until we're happy with our rural register and add that. But again, that's probably some time away. We've probably now assessed about half of the township in terms of photographs and which should be added. But it's much more difficult in the rural area to see properties from the road. And also the complication in the rural area is that under the Building Code Act, an agricultural property doesn't require a demolition permit. So we really want to capture like old houses and old barns that might not necessarily require a permit to be demolished, but we need to put them on a register and we need to notify them that they have to let us know if they want to demolish these buildings, regardless of whether they need a building permit or not. So that's another process unto itself. We could wait until everything is done and then remove the demolition control bylaw, or we can just remove it from the urban centers to free up, again, the chief building official from having to do a staff report every time somebody comes forward with a demolition permit that has nothing to do with heritage.
I have one more sort of follow-up question. So if we remove this bylaw, so you said the chief building official has 10 days and they have to provide the demolition permit within that 10 days. So if there is a little anomaly somewhere and the building official lets you know, like, oh, you missed, this wasn't on the registry, I think we need to look at that. Do we have that opportunity, like, despite the 10 days being super, like, short turnaround time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we oppose demolition?
Okay, so the Heritage Act allows a council to designate at any time. Even if a building permit has been issued for demolition, a council can always designate. They don't need, again, they can do it against an owner's will. So let's say we find out a property's come in for demolition. We didn't know anything about it. It was never on any register or list. A council can designate at any time. Actually, now I'm just trying to think about, I know there's a small caveat about if a proper, oh, okay, that's what it is. If a property is not on a municipal register as a non-designated property at the time of application for a demolition permit, you cannot add it to the municipal register. Once somebody has already applied and given notice, applied for a demolition permit, you can't add it at that point to the municipal register to give you 60 days, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. But A council, again, can designate at any time. I've been in municipalities where it's happened. A council designated within basically that 10-day window because the property was not on a register. And what it does is effectively it voids any permit that was issued. So if the chief building official issues a permit and the building has not come down and we get wind of something that makes it, sort of worthy of designation and requires protection, you could call an emergency meeting of council. You can ask council to designate. Council has that power to do it. And once they issue a notice of intention to designate, once it's public and in the newspaper, it's that permit that was issued is declared void. So there's a lot of technicalities, and it does get, there's a lot of timelines written into the Heritage Act and the Building Code Act, but really the municipal register is the safety net, and it's what's intended to capture heritage properties and give us the review time to be that 60 days before somebody proposes demolition. So it's the Heritage Act and the Municipal Register that's intended to take away that, to provide that research time. It's not really the Demolition Control Bylaw that's intended to do that. The Demolition Control Bylaw is intended to protect housing from being demolished.
Mariana, wasn't there some change last year when we were discussing changes to the Heritage Act that we went through that changed the nature of the listing process?
Yes, Bill 108 changed some things to the Heritage Act, but I believe it was supposed to be in effect in May, but that's been delayed, I think, to my knowledge, just because of COVID. The implementation of that has been delayed. So I'm trying to remember, it had to do more with once a notice of intention to designate is issued, there's a certain period of time now within which you have to bring the bylaw back to council. There's actually some documentation that I can send to the committee that explains what those changes were that are being proposed.
It was something that suggested that owners had to agree to be listed.
There's notification required for listing as well, which now the Act is silent on. But I believe that was one of the changes proposed, yes.
And was there something that said people could request to be removed from the list, from the register, or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, so that could slightly affect our ability to list properties as well, although most people don't seem to object.
Yeah, it has to do with notification, which I think is a good practice, because if people don't know they're listed, some municipalities list people and don't notify them at all. Some notify them before, some notify them after. There's really no consistent practice. This is going to put in place a practice where people will have to be notified. I don't know if it's once they're listed or before they're listed. I can't recall. I'd have to look at the actual
And I think we
proposed.
did it when we did it for the urban area. We did a notification, didn't we?
Yes, we did a notification. We held a meeting, an open house. We explained what it meant. And as I said, after all of that, we had only a handful that still just wanted to be removed because they thought it would impact their property value or whatnot.
Okay, is there another step then to this, or are you proposing, so what is it that you're now proposing?
Well, this again is another thing I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention, to have a discussion about it, to see how the committee feels about it. What we could do then is talk about the properties that were not added, to see if that handful of properties should be added, regardless of the owner's objections, I guess, because I guess the protection we would consider more important, and we could have that discussion at council. I mean, only council can add or remove from the register, so we would have to go to council anyway to have those properties added, and those people can come to council and they could say they don't want to be added, and it's council's decision in the end. But yeah, essentially we'd have to be confident in our heritage register, at least for the urban centers that we're proposing to remove the demolition control bylaw from.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just to bring it to the committee for discussion. It doesn't have to happen right away. If the committee wants to think about it a little bit, do some research. I could send out some information on the Bill 108 changes as well to see if there might be any impacts from that. And I'll take a read through that again, because that's kind of been on hold for a little bit. But I just wanted to bring it again to the committee's attention.
Okay, thanks very much. Does anybody have any comment then on what direction we should go with this, or do you want to just, wait for some more input from Mariana?
I think it would be good to think about it. I think too, keeping in mind, if we're relying on the registry, that's kind of increases the priority of that a bit more, that's kept current and up to date too. Because I think over, the next 10 years, there's going to be sort of a new cohort of structures that we might consider as heritage, as sort of things from the 50s and 60s and like kind of unique architectural examples that are newer would still be considered under the Heritage Act and worthy of protection.
Okay, so it sounds like there's perhaps less enthusiasm for the Demolition Control Act removal until we get the register, these changes to the register fully.
I think what maybe we might want to think about is putting a process in place so we're continually, we have been working on the register, but we're quite focused now on the rural area. But maybe to go hand in hand with this in terms of removing the demolition control bylaw, we might want to have a little bit of a more formalized process in place where we're continually reviewing the register and making sure that it is as comprehensive as possible and includes basically everything we want to put on there. And we might want to have a policy in place where if we think something should be added, we take it right to council. We don't wait, because in the past what we did is we tried to compile an entire list because it's an administrative process and we do hold an open house session. So we tried to compile a whole list before we actually went through the motions. But what we could do is, like, if we're aware of a property that should be listed, we should just list it. We could just do the research, take it to council and just ask them to list it. We can do it as a one-off as well. So I see what you're saying, and maybe, yes, hand in hand should be some type of process where we are continually looking periodically at any additional properties that should be added that haven't been yet. So that, again, we're confident that it's actually running, it's a living document.
Steve, go ahead.
Thanks. I think that we want to make sure, though, that especially if you're going to get rid of the demolition control bylaw, that there's some type of document that comes forward, an information document, that every single time a new property comes forward for listing or designating, that it's at the very least, council has reminded us to why it's so important. For example, because we got rid of the demolition control bylaw, because it happens so often. For example, you got your CIP programs. We have different programs that are built in a committee. The committee comes forward with ideas, starts the process, but when it comes back to council, you have to be careful that the council doesn't forget why it was important, especially when you have a resident who comes forward and starts really pushing hard against it. So for example, and I was on council at that time when we tried to do it. I forget how many years that was, 6 or 7 years ago. Then council says, okay, well, we also still have the demolition control bylaw, so some of these houses we could still protect no matter what. If we get rid of it, then we don't have that option. Council doesn't have that option. And I don't just mean the first time we do it, but into the 10 years from now, do they remember when someone comes and says, I don't want to be on the list? Are they going to say, oh, wait, we have to have them on the list because we don't have a demolition control bylaw anymore to protect? So it needs to be something that's going to go into the years well beyond this committee's understanding and this council's understanding. Why did we do this? That's my point.
All right, I think we've had quite a.
Can I just make one, just one quick one?
Sure.
So if you've got a dual process going on, and if you've got the demolition control bylaw still in effect in the rural area, but not in the urban area. And you have a rural homeowner that is not listed, that then becomes subject to the demolition control bylaw. And you have person in the urban area that then says, well, wait a minute, why wasn't I able to access this, but person in the rural area was? Do you think that could create a problem in terms of having something operational in one area and not operational in another?
We have bylaws that apply to certain areas and not others all the time. So as long as we can explain why, like what the reasoning is behind, you know, why we have it in one area and not another, I don't think it's an issue. But really, I mean, it's putting in another process. So when somebody in the rural area comes forward, we look at, is it listed or is it not listed? If it's listed, it goes to me. I take it to the committee. We go through our research, our process, our report to council. If it's not listed, it goes to Randy, the chief building official. He has to send it out. I send it to the committee anyway for your information. I say it's not listed, but does anyone have any major objections? Your only objection could be, we should designate it, really, because at the end of the day, that's the only authority we would have to stop a property from being demolished. So then it's just an extra process now for the chief building official has to go through the motions and write the report and take it to council. Oftentimes it's a property that's had significant water damage in the basement or has been through a fire. And sometimes there have been cases where they really have needed to demolish it quickly because of a safety reason, a safety concern. So what we see is it's just sometimes it's an added step, but again, does the protection and sort of that safety net outweigh the efficiency aspect of it? So that's sort of what we're trying to weigh is it worth it for efficiency's sake to remove this ability again to stall people for an extra 20 days when they're not listed. The listing takes care of itself, but then again, so, you know, are they all on there though? The idea was once the register is complete, we wouldn't really require the demolition control bylaw. But that's the question is the register ever considered fully complete? And is there ever enough confidence in it that we can't catch something and have an extra 20 days to review something?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question for you to put to a Heritage Committee, because the nature of the Heritage Committee is to not want to, you know, is to want to have as much notice as possible. I'm not getting a strong sense one way or the other, but I think it might be at least, you know, a good way to summarize would be to just say that this should be brought back to us at some point as another information item once there's some more work done on the register. Is that and in the meantime people could just think about the possible implications of this?
Yeah, it could be an information piece we take to council and see what council's comfortable with. If council wants to be seeing all the demolitions still coming forward under the demolition control bylaw and having that as a safety net, or if council doesn't feel that needs to come forward and our municipal register takes care of it, you know, it could be a question we pose to council as well. So I just wanted the committee's input on it as well.
All right. Well, for now, I guess we can.
Yeah, I think
that under advisement. Is that what the term is? Okay. Thanks, Mariana. That was yeah. So people, I would say, you know, it sounds like there's a little more enthusiasm for the first option, which was the rewriting of the
heritage permit delegation.
Yes. Yeah. And the second one, I think we're a little more hesitant move forward, but I think, you know, there's a certain openness to continue discussing it.
Sure.
So then we can shift quickly then over to the cultural heritage landscape, because I wanted to get a chance to talk about the bridges before we end up at 8 o'clock.
Sure, I can I just wanted to do a quick update just so the committee knows where it's at. And with COVID, it's delayed things slightly, but not very much. It's more been people's vacations, but we did receive a final draft of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Study with recommendations that the subcommittee has gone through, and we've provided comments back. So once we have a final draft, we will bring it forward to the committee and council. So we will be, I'm not sure yet about process, but we're really trying to get it to an actual open, proper meeting of council versus a Zoom meeting, just to get, have an easier discussion and have people be able to attend the meeting and be a little bit more involved once we release it to the public. So what we're doing now is trying to take some of the recommendations that have been made in the study and put some budget numbers to it so we can be prepared for some discussions at council in budget time and when it's released to the public, to say these are what we think are the priorities moving forward, and this is where we should allocate some funds for future studies and future areas to focus on. So I'm anticipating that when and if council meetings resume in the near future is when the final draft would be released to the public and through council, just for comment. So we're not looking at implementing anything right away. We're just looking at releasing it to the public for a while, having it out there, and then having some comments back. So that's just the status of it for everybody's information.
Okay. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mariana, is it possible that the committee can have get a copy of the draft together with the comments that were returned or sent back to the consultants?
I think we'll probably have that available. The terms of reference were written in such a way that there's a technical committee and then there's the project committee. So the project committee included 3 members of the Heritage Committee. So that's Dawn, Nico, and Phil. So, and then and myself. So we've been working with the consultants. I think when I release something to this committee, it's released to the public. So I just have to be careful as to when something is released to the public, because once it's out there, it's a draft and it's available for comment. So as soon as it is ready and finalized, then yes, we can definitely provide it to the committee for review.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks very much, Mariana, for that update. And we're happy with that. If we're happy with that, we can move on to, I guess it's an update, a review for our information on the, it says Council Bridge, but I think what it was is the 4WG and 24WG recommendation to designate, which went to council in July, I believe. And then so that meeting was available for viewing online, the video. And I sent out a link to that with some timelines on the video so you could watch. I think it was, I'm hoping that you were able to watch that, because that's really the best way to get a sense of what the discussion was. Jean was able to go in my place to present the Heritage Centre Wellington point of view, and Mariana spoke to it, and also a local property owner and farmer, Richard Wright, also had comments, and then the discussion of the council. So were you able to watch that, anybody? Or did you? Because that I urge you to go back and I can resend the link to view that for yourselves, because that's really instructive, I think, of what went on. But in lieu of that, perhaps Nico, as chair of the subcommittee, would you want to just give us an update on where we're at with what transpired?
I didn't, you mean at council?
Well, yeah, and then where we are.
Watch that either, Phil.
No, but I mean, in terms of where you, well, Jean, then you would give us the update, and then we would discuss where we're headed after that. Is that reasonable?
Sorry, an update as to the council meeting?
Yeah, I can do it. That's fine.
No,
Yep.
that's okay. The meeting was June 29.
Yeah, okay, so it was, yeah, the June meeting, sorry.
The June meeting. This was taken to council based on the meeting that we had, I think it was in March, where we wanted to recommend the Heritage Committee felt the only way that it could get before council was to designate these bridges. So that's what we did. We designated the bridges. We took it to council. We were advised on the Thursday afternoon, whatever date that is, that it would go to council on the 29th. So we were given almost no time to prepare anything for this meeting. In spite of that, we did put together a presentation. I made the presentation to council. We had two councillors ask questions, Councillor Foster and Councillor Kittredge. The only two that asked a question about it. Councillor Van Leeuwen was silent when I made the presentation. He did not ask me any questions. And basically I had 5 minutes and I made the presentation. Afterwards, the discussion was the township staff, Colin Baker, made a he spoke against designating the bridges. He stated that he had made or had 2 touch points to the committee where he shared this information. The problem with that is the municipal class environmental assessment doesn't call for a touch point. It calls for consultation. That the Heritage Committee should be involved, must be involved in the process. So it's not something where they come to the committee and they say, oh, by the way, this is what we've done, this is our recommendation, and go home. They must be involved in the process. We weren't. He stated to the council that there was a Part 2 order request. As a private individual, I put that through. He said that because of COVID, because of whatever, it could be 6 months, 18 months before it gets resolved. It doesn't matter how long it takes. The bridges cannot be demolished until that has been resolved. So council chose to ignore its Heritage Committee and go with township staff and agree to, demolish the bridges. I thought it was a foolish move on council's part because we did give them an option. Don't designate, send it back to the committee and let the committee look at it, and then we'll come back to you. They chose not to, but to go straight for demolition. Had they come back to the committee could have looked at it, made the recommendations. Council still has the option to say no, but they didn't. So now we're still at a Part 2. It was short-sighted on council's part. Anyway, so council chose to ignore their Heritage Committee and the recommendations that they made and go ahead and demolish the bridges. So,
okay, all right. Thank you, Jean, for that. Then I think one of the other points that we were going to discuss, Nico, was the proposal to develop a strategy to deal with the other bridges.
Right. So I think in order for us to get a fulsome idea as to just exactly what we're dealing with, we really need to have a comprehensive view as to which bridges they're actually looking at. That's point number one. The other point that I wanted to make was defining the intersection points. So once a team is appointed to look at the bridges, where are the intersection points with the Heritage Committee? And I don't think that that's very clearly defined. It's not. I don't think it's very clearly defined for municipal staff, and I don't think it's very clearly defined for the Heritage Committee. So as Jean was saying, if there is an onus to consult and an onus to be involved, then where do the intersection points fall? And so that's, I think we need to be really clear about that, how we go about doing that, whether we set up some kind of a flow chart or whatever. I'm not sure, but I want to make sure that we don't get into this position again when potentially we can have all of this to draw back on to move us forward.
Okay, great, good points from both Jean and Nico. Mariana, would you be able to comment then for us on what this process would look like and how the Heritage Committee could be involved?
So under the EA, the Class EA process, there's a duty to consult. There, typically, we receive notice of, I forget the wording, but the initiation of the Class EA process. So that comes to the Heritage Committee as a notice that the EA is commencing. It explains it. Under the EA process, when a bridge is, I think it's anything over 40 years old, it has to be looked at as a heritage structure. So it gets assessed. We receive the SHARE, the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, when it's prepared. So that typically comes to the committee, and you've seen many of those over the years. And then if that SHARE indicates that there is heritage value, it will be moved up to sort of a heritage impact assessment. So it will recommend that a heritage impact assessment be prepared. So there are several what we call touch points, what are information points that have to go to the Heritage Committee. The Heritage Committee gets these reports. I think the confusion lies somewhat in the what is the actual decision-making ability there? What is the Heritage Committee being asked to do? When a heritage impact assessment is put before you and it says this asset clearly has heritage value, the question is, does the Heritage Committee automatically recommend designation? That is always at the Heritage Committee's disposal. When you have an HIA or a SHARE in front of you that says something has value, the committee always has the ability to look at it and say, well, this report says it has value. So it's up to you to decide if you want to recommend to council that this should be designated. Council looks at many things in an EA process, as does the engineer and the team that's working on the EA. So heritage is one of the things that they look at. So the recommendation that goes to council is from the engineer is not solely based on heritage. Heritage was one of the factors. Can we improve the process? Definitely. I think over the years, through Colin Baker and myself, we are trying to establish more consultation and a better relationship so that the Heritage Committee is getting the information that is required to get to the committee. They're trying to do it early in the process, as you saw with some of the other bridges when Adam Dickinson came to the committee. So when there is something that they think that the Heritage Committee might have an interest in, they try to come to the committee early, and we put it on the agenda for discussion. And I think, there was some miscommunication or some misunderstanding regarding the steps in this process. That's how I see it anyway, in terms of what the committee's intentions were at the time. So whether the committee was considering designation or not, I think in the initial meeting where it came forward, the committee was focused on the report itself and was expecting further information to come forward. And that might have been taken as the committee didn't have an interest in designation. So, you know, I don't want to assume anything, but I think when this committee has a clear intention or sees some clear value in something, it's very important to say it up front, right at the beginning, that the committee feels these bridges in this case have value and should be protected. Then that gets relayed to council through staff. And I don't know if there was a misunderstanding there on the part of Colin, whether the committee was intending to designate or not. Anyway, all we can do at this point is learn from each situation. And I agree that there definitely has to be more communication, and expectations need to be made clear. So I think moving forward, what I'm going to try to do again is bring something to the committee's attention, say we received this notice, we received this share, we received this HIA. It clearly, and the issue, the concern that I have, and what sort of was missed through all of this at council, is that we need a comprehensive strategy. When we're talking about capital costs and a 10-year program for bridges, we should be talking about which ones have value and how do we look at them. Because when this Heritage Committee is basically looking at it at the end of a process, but it's very piecemeal. You're getting these bridges coming to you one off, one at a time, and each one of them, almost each one, is going to say it has value. So the question now is, are you going to be designating each one? Are you going to just be taking that recommendation because a consultant has said it has value? Are you going to be taking each one to council? Are you going to be looking at it in a comprehensive way? Which I think is actually what's warranted here. And what we should be looking at is some sort of comprehensive strategy in terms of how are we going to look at all of the bridges. We have the Arch Truss Beam study that was done that has identified many of them. But I think we need to work hand in hand with Colin and the engineering department in terms of which ones are coming up sooner than others, which ones are in poorer condition than others, which ones actually have stronger heritage value. And that to me is, I don't know what the answers are and how to do that. We attempted to do it several years ago when we looked at the Irvin Street Bridge as the prime example and the one with the least amount of traffic and the least amount of impacts to farmers. And as I said at that meeting, that was the one that we decided to make a strong example and invest the money in, and thankfully council agreed. So that one is a nice showcase for us as to what can be done. Is council going to be willing to do that on every bridge now? I think realistically we know that that's not the case, but the question now is, where do we focus our attention on which bridges, and where would council agree to put money and funding in to try to restore some of these? Like, which are the ones? I don't think having the approach of a piecemeal decision on one at a time bridges is the answer. And it really just puts the committee in a bad position and council in a bad position, and staff as well. It's really not the approach to take, in my opinion, but I think we need to have a better solution to the issue.
Okay, just before I see you, Jean, and I'm going to let you answer. It's 8 o'clock. What do we need to do to maybe continue for 10 minutes?
Phil, if you just want to go ahead and continue, we got started a little bit late with the delay in technology, so give yourself 10, 15 minutes.
Great idea. Thank you. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. Yes, I do appreciate your words. The intent is not that every bridge should be saved or can be saved. They can't. There is, of course, there are other facts. It's that a process must be followed. And in this instance, the process wasn't followed in spite of trying to ensure that it was. So, and you mentioned touch points. That's not in the municipal class environmental assessment. It's consultation. And I think when we use different words to describe something, we have a different idea or understanding. A touch point to me is quite different from a consultation. Consultation is being involved, questions, answers. This is what needs to be done. I also agree wholeheartedly that we can't approach this piecemeal. And I think that Mr. Wright mentioned that at the meeting. He said, it seems that these things come up one at a time. You know, can't the Heritage Committee get its act together? Then perhaps the Heritage Committee can ensure that township staff work with them to get our act together, so that we are looking at all of the bridges in the community, and we do put forward a process as to the ones that should be saved. So yes, excuse me, I hear and understand what you're saying, but a touch point is not a consultation, and we should be using the verbiage that's in the environmental class assessment. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Jean. I appreciate your comments, and I think we kind of circled back to a point where I see you, Nancy, where I think what we need to focus on, just for the sake of this evening, is how do we bring this back onto our agenda, and in what form should it come back? So Nancy, just with that in mind, go ahead.
Sure, I would just appreciate, and I'm listening to all the comments, and I think they're all really, really valid. What I would appreciate, from my understanding, being, you know, I've been on for a year now, but the role of the committee kind of, in my mind, I'm trying to understand, you know, for this particular item, for example, it came to the committee, it was presented, there were questions with regard to the consultant's report and the focus that they were taking. They were asked to go back based on information that we had in terms of the recommendations contained within. Now, I wasn't at the meeting in February because I was out of the country, but then my understanding was that, you know, it didn't really come back. It was an information item. So then that's how it proceeded. So I think that's where the perception is, that the committee may not have been involved as much as it should be. So if you're looking at processes, it would be really helpful for me to understand, because we've talked a little bit tonight on authorities and the role and what have you. So, and again, I know timing and COVID and whatever, but when I started on the committee, there was a little bit of information, but I'm still kind of trying to struggle with, okay, our role in recommending or what have you. But in a lot of people spend a lot of time and effort, and the staff do, in terms of information and what have you, but the perception could be we go to all of this and yet we really have no role anyway. So if you're looking at processes with regard to these kinds of items, it would be helpful for me to understand, you know, just what role we have as a committee.
I think our role varies. It'll vary depending on the nature of the decision we're being asked to render. It all, you know, it's not always exactly the same, but I struggle with the same problems that you have had, and sometimes it's seeing how they play out that gives you some background and some experience. Unfortunately, we weren't able to hear from Bert Duclos, and we weren't able to attend his 2 sessions, which would have, I think, helped certainly the newer people and myself and all of us, including our counselor, Steve, and others. We were hoping to attend that process and so I think, you know, we're still going to look at providing some education, perhaps with Bert in the future. Is that correct, Jean?
Yeah. Yes, I'm playing email tag with Bert. So as soon as, because we had talked about trying to do a video lesson with them. I'm not sure that's going to work out, but I have been in contact with them. So as soon as we find something out, we can, or I find something out, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Nancy, for that question. I think it's important, and we're going to keep working on that. Dawn, go ahead, you're next. And
yeah, I think my
just try and
my
keep
question may have, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think my question may have been answered, because I was going to say the workshop, I think, would have helped all of us. But
okay.
I imagine it's going to come back on the agenda. I was just going to throw something out there too. Is it possible to say that maybe we need a bridge registry?
Well, I think we're working from a bridge, from the one guide, the one study.
The Wellington County?
Yeah.
No, the
Wellington, yeah.
multi-county one, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which is very comprehensive, but I think that's something that would be, like, I don't want to get into a wide-ranging discussion on how we're going to do this. I think my question
No,
is,
I know.
how are we going to bring this back onto our agenda? In what form? So if you could speak to that, Steve, if that's what the question is about. Otherwise, go ahead. Steve?
So, well, first, how are you going to bring it back onto, you mean those two bridges or just bridges in
No,
general?
the whole thing, the entire bridge strategy, which we've been talking about.
Okay, well, first I would say that Mariana's point in regards to the 10-year capital and the bridges that we know that we're going, the township, obviously with their 10-year capital, we review our bridges every, well, depending on how bad they're getting, they slowly eventually fall into what's called a 6-month review when they get really bad, and then they have to keep rotating.
That's the part of the problem, Steve, is we don't want to get to the point where they're really bad. We need to, I mean,
Right.
We need to get on them before they're really bad, before they're
That's right.
into the river.
So that's where you work with the capital, with the 10-year capital. I think that that would be the piece that Mariana could grab that 10-year capital and say which ones are coming up for sure, and then also work forward with Colin and the rest of the team there and Adam to say, hey, which other ones do we see falling onto the 10-year capital in the next little while? Because that's really where we're mandated to have a 10-year capital plan anyway, in order by the province. So that's how you should, I believe that's how we should actually see these things come forward in order to do the planning. Some of the other pieces that when I listen to the committee, that I do believe that should be said quickly, and that is one thing, is that council doesn't ignore the Heritage Committee. And I think it's very certain to say that, especially when the term ignore the committee sounds like council took the Heritage Plan and threw it out. They took the Heritage recommendation, and I would back it up just a hair further, just to show how much they respect the committee, is that when there was the thought at the committee that they weren't heard, even though council already previously made the decision in December, I also came to the committee and encouraged the committee and said, listen, you know what, put it forward, make your recommendation, let's do it a second time. The decision's been made, but let's get it before council the second time. So what happens is council again had that opportunity to see it a second time, the decision, and had the discussion and weighed all the different plans. So it's not an ignoring, but it's a weighing of the plans, of the things to determine. So I'd hate the committee to feel, and especially because you had a lot of discussion of what is your role, the committee should not feel that they're ignored. They should just feel that they're one piece on the balance scale. It's not the first year. Like, I've been in council 10 years, and over those 10 years, we've had multiple ones where we would have arguments and discussions over designations, whether the committee chose to designate it or didn't choose to, based on representation. So please, as the committee, and I think it's important to say here, never feel ignored. It's one piece of the balancing for the council. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. That's actually good to hear again.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think what needs to happen, maybe Nico knows what needs to happen. Go ahead, Nico. You're my right.
In terms of moving this forward,
yeah,
I think it might be a good idea when we if we continue to look at the issue of process and consultation. Notice to a committee is not the same as consultation, and I think that Jean was talking about some of that as well. So perhaps some of us from the Heritage Committee could actually sit down and meet with Colin in the engineering department just to try to work some of this through. That's possibly one alternative, but I think we need to, if we're going to bring anything back to the next committee, I think we need to have some continued discussion on the issue of process. How do we define terminology? How do we define consultation? How do we define simply receiving notice and that sort of thing? So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, and could that be brought? How would that be brought back onto the agenda then, Lisa?
Well, I think a further, oh, I'm sorry, are you addressing that to Lisa?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Nico. Yep.
Yeah, just furtherance of the current discussion.
Okay. So we'll another information item.
That would be fine.
Okay.
Can I add something quickly here? I think it's definitely worth, and I have every intention of discussing with Colin, a new process sort of moving forward, because I think we've learned a lot in terms of trying to understand better the EA process and consultation, what that means. And normally, I guess what that meant to us is putting it on an agenda for discussion and having the engineer present is consultation, because the committee can ask questions, can make its case, can say whatever they want, and the engineer takes that back as part of the EA consultation process. But if there is something further that's required from the process, if it's a separate meeting required or something else that can be built in, then we can definitely discuss that further until the committee is comfortable and the EA process is being met. So I think I'm willing to do that sort of discussion with Colin and with the committee and try to bring all the interests together in terms of understanding what is required, when is consultation required, and what is the most effective way to have that consultation happen. So I'm planning to do that anyway, and we'll bring forward something to the committee. But I think Nico's suggestion is good as well in terms of having maybe a workshop or some kind of discussion with Colin as well to try to figure out a process to move forward.
Okay. And I see Steve. Recognize Steve. Let's make that our last. Steve, you get to have the last word here. Besides me.
Okay, real fast then. I know council actually runs what's called a tracking sheet on the bottom of their agenda, and I was just looking at it. And I know you say, how do we get this back on, or what are we going to do? Does Heritage Committee have any type of a tracking sheet where if we don't want to lose certain items, that we can just put them on tracking sheet? They sit on the bottom of the agenda every time and say, oh yeah, we're going to do that. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're going to do that training one. Oh yeah. And it doesn't necessarily have to get completed every time, but it keeps it in our minds to go, yeah, we still wanted to do that. And that might be something the bridge one would go into, bridge consultation kind of, so that we know that we're not going to lose it somewhere through, 6 months later through meetings. Just a suggestion.
Okay. All right. I don't want to cut it off, but I think we've had a good start to our discussion here. Okay, you get the last word then, Jean.
No, I just want to say, has everybody seen this?
No, haven't. Looks awesome.
Well,
are you selling it?
I bought one too. Yeah, it's pretty
Who's
fascinating.
Who's promoting this?
Oh, you get them in Walmart if you're lucky.
Yeah.
They sell out pretty fast, but
it's monopoly. And I have to have the last word and say, unfortunately, 2 of the bridges have been destroyed.
But you can buy the rest, right?
Is there one for Elora?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so this will come back. Nico, thank you for your comments. And Jean, thank you for your comments and the time you took to go to council. Again, thank you. And to everybody for taking the time to come this evening. So enjoy the rest of your summer. And I guess we'll see everyone back in early September at some point, mid-September. Yep. Okay. Meeting, do we have to adjourn the meeting? Yes. Meeting adjourned? All, yeah. Consensus? Good.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yep, see.
Night.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Devin.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks,
Yeah.
Lisa, Devlin.
Everyone take care.
Good night.
Yeah, take care.